join us.
Oh, yeah. I heard the horn of Gondor. And, we need some more. Yeah, give me that horn. Give me that horn. You know why? Because we got a lot of my friends sitting here. We got Ryan, Will, James, Nick, and we just had ourselves a good time at Theology Beer Camp 2024. And, the Geek stage was just rocking. I have no idea exactly how Nick and James managed to pull together a Tolkien legendarium based liturgy, but that happened. And
Nick pulled that together.
Well, I was a Louvatar, but James participated and created the divine music,
Ooh. Well, yeah, we had a great time. And so here's what I was thinking. We'll take turns with everyone telling like a highlight from camp and stuff. And if you're whichever of the Geek stage things you were a part of, you should tell us something about what happened there. And then who knows what we'll talk about. I've got some ideas. But we'll see how it goes because mostly I've gotten all these surveys from people that came to camp. Geek stage regulars were very thrilled, said it gets better every year.
Yeah. Geek stage regulars.
I am waiting for the audio of the alien session to arrive because I was told that Ryan and Leah kind of blew the walls off of the Geek stage.
They really did.
Did
on
we?
The Alien franchise. Yeah.
Fantastic.
I'm just saying. But there was a session, obviously the Alien one. We had a Tolkien one that me and Nick and Craig were a part of, which if y'all joined other live streams related to Tolkien, I'm sure you've seen Nick, Craig, and I talk for 3.5 hours and it ends with me crying.
It was not so different at beer camp.
Well, it just wasn't 3.5 hours.
Yeah.
It only took 45 minutes.
And then we got video games session, which was exciting. And Ben Chica, who is the president of the Tillich Society and wrote a book on video games, he told me this is so much fun. If I have to pick, I'd rather do this in the AAR, though I'm not suggesting someone skip their duties as president of the Tillich Society. Oh, Sam, 3.5 hour panels next time. That would really only be possible for me if it was Tolkien or the Tillich versus Process panel, because there were too many people for me on there to really tell them how wrong they were.
Isn't Theology Beer Camp just basically one long panel anyway?
I mean, it's kind of like, what are the 10 things Tripp likes the most that he doesn't do in the bedroom? And then could you do them for 3 days with your friends?
Snoring. No.
But I will say, wait, yeah. And then there was the D&D panel, which Samantha was on.
Yeah.
Okay. Samantha, do you want to join and talk about it? If so, we can send you the link. I know Sam's recovering currently, so no pressure. But you're more than
still
welcome.
recovering from beer camp?
No.
She's needed 2 weeks.
I would say it all took us a little while, but
Yes. You know what? Kids, they don't understand that you were busy and didn't sleep. And they just want your attention when you get back. And you're like, whoa. Daddy's not as young as he used to be. Recovery time's different.
It's time for
Just
Halloween.
come back and say you were in a lock-in, or
Yeah. It's like feeling like you just ran a lock-in for 3 days. All right. So let's see here. Ryan was on first. So we're going to let Ryan go first. Plus,
cool.
you said cool. That's what I'm talking about. All right.
So Trip already kind of mentioned it, but I had the privilege of getting to work with Leah Robinson, who Trip's really familiar with. And we kind of collaborated on a look at the Alien franchise, mainly through the Ridley Scott directed movies. And I was already excited because earlier on, Trip had floated it out there that Leah was interested in doing something with the Geek Stage, and I was like, I call dibs. I'm working with Leah Robinson. The rest of you guys, back off. This is the one that because I find Leah so endlessly entertaining with Theology on the Rocks and Christy Whaley, but also her book, Bad Theology, is I really enjoy. So I was kind of just I really wanted that panel, and I wanted it to go well. We exchanged notes through her experience of the hurricanes in Georgia. So we didn't really exchange a bunch of different notes, but when we showed up, we kind of geeked out in the lobby the day prior. And as we walked away from that 10-minute kind of just geek out conversation, a few times we had said like, oh, no, that's not in the notes, but we need to add that to the notes because we can't not talk about that. And she was like, oh, but don't forget, we still want to talk about this. And I was like, oh, of course. So I worked that night revamping our notes. And then when we got there in the morning, she was like, we're going to be fine. If we do like half of what we talked about in the hallway yesterday, we'll be fine. And
again, like Sammy said, like 3.5-hour panels could easily be done on some of those geek sessions.
I mean, when I say Leah and I scratched the surface on Alien, we didn't even talk about the xenomorphs. Like we didn't even talk about the blood and the guts and all that stuff. We only talked about, easy things like creator complex and artificial intelligence and, the last girl trope in horror. So it was, simple things like that. It take no time at all to explain to a group of people that are also interested in that topic. It was fantastic. We had a lot of fun. I feel like we were able to balance like having an introspective, like substantive conversation and also have a ton of fun. So, I could talk with that woman about Alien any like drop of a hat. We could just talk about it again. And that's what we did later on, later on that day, as people kept coming up to us, just kind of asking follow-up questions. I was like, well, let's really get Leah into this conversation. That was my highlight of the Geek Stage. I enjoyed everybody else's panels. The D&D panel that Will helped facilitate was fantastic. I really enjoyed that one as well. And then Nick curated a D&D session for us that was off the chain fun. And despite Will and I trying to ruin that entire campaign and be like the screw ups in the group, we still managed to kind of beat the campaign, Nick, maybe a little bit.
Yeah, we did. We beat the campaign. Y'all, well, not me. Y'all beat the campaign.
I just know that I'm sitting there setting up, and then out when Kim walks up carrying a giant sword, I was just like, clearly I missed out on the fun.
Girl came to play.
Yeah, she did. She was rolling some nat 20s while I was rolling nat 2s out there.
Well, you rolled a lot of 2s, Will?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know.
I tried to turn Boromir into Captain America, and it did not work.
Oh.
And I just kept rolling just garbage. I'm trying to, like, frisbee my shield around, and it's like, oh, you do no damage, and I think you actually get kicked in the nuts. Nick, I would play it as Boromir. Didn't Boromir get kicked in the nuts by an orc at one point?
I think at one point you tried to do something, and I think it was so bad, and then I think you rolled a terrible roll, and I made the orc kick you in the nuts, and you took 1 point of damage.
So things went well.
Oh, I have a good story though. I have one of my favorite stories. If I could just the D&D session that we did the pregame. So, like, yeah, the highlight was just the joy of seeing the progression of the trilogy of beer camps. 2022 was here in Chapel Hill, and we had a Geek stage, the God Pods, and then we had the God Pod Strike Back, and the Geek stage got a little larger. We still hung out in a youth room, and they have a bigger youth room in 2024 with the return of the God Pods, and just seeing how, as you said, the regulars coming back to these. It's not the largest panel. It's not the most people that gather, but that the diehards and those who really geek out on things and like to see the intersection of the big questions that revolve around theology and philosophy and in our fandoms are pretty faithful. And it's been fun to see the progression and evolution of that stage and the different. There's so much content out there that like it's not just Star Wars and Star Trek or sci-fi and comics. It's D&D, it's the Alien franchise, it's horror, it's video games, all those things wrapped up into one. And the pregame of the D&D session was so fun, just getting a character and living into the character and having fun rolling. But I will say there was one point where good thing the youth room had some protective gear around it, because I think I threw a pin and it stuck in the wall. Like, that's how good a throw knife dagger thing I did. I was like, all right. I was like, Nick, I'm throwing 2 daggers. And he goes, your first one, nat 1, like barely even gets to the person. And then the next one was a nat 20. He's like, stuck him right in the face or something like that. I said, this is what it looks like. I took 2 pins and I said, this is what it looks like when I threw the first one left-handed. Barely threw it. And the next one, I threw with my right hand. It just stuck right in the wall. I was like, oh, it stuck in the whole place. With nuts.
It wasn't supposed to be a LARP session.
I know we were definitely LARPing. I flipped off some orcs with Mage Hand. And
can I share my screen trip real quick? Is that allowed?
Don't you have a executive
here we go.
membership,
Boom.
right?
There you go. Do you see that?
Nope.
I'm gonna hit show.
Okay.
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
I used Mage Hand to
was the
flip
MVP.
off a bunch of orcs, and we reenacted it. And I just made the orcs mad. It didn't really distract them much. It just made them mad. And yeah. So that pregame, I mean, it is the conversations that leads up to beer camp and the planning. But then once you're there, before the panel, after the panel, all those conversation relationships that you either begin or you kind of you begin this relationship at beer camp, or you like nurture something that's been there for over a course of 3 years. So that's the fun part of beer camp and the geek stage is endless things to geek out on, but yet you nurture these relationships that started years back over a course of 3 years. Look forward to a big reunion. It's not just a big lock-in. It's not just a big youth camp or 10 things that Tripp loves, but it's also a reunion with your friends, and that's what I value out of it. And you're surprised. You're like, oh, this is going to be a pretty cool topic to get into, but the way that it evolves and the process of it all, you never know what's going to right around the corner. So pretty fun.
So, okay, I want to, James. Your first beer camp was last year, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was first Theology Beer Camp, though. I think your first appearance on the podcast was 1,600 and some episodes ago. So, you're familiar with the podcast. But this time, you brought your son. Y'all participated in the music and such, along with plenty of other stuff. But I'm interested. What was your with being a part of multiple different things, like what's a highlight kind of thing for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think that was it. I mean, it's always fun to do music stuff if you are a music geek, as well as all the various other kinds of geek that we are collectively. But bringing my son along, so I mean, the hardest thing, although it brought me joy indirectly, was that we decided to divide and conquer. And so he went to the geek stage and I had to go to somewhere else, and then we'd compare notes and do things like that, which otherwise, under no circumstance I would be doing. I'm not sure whether that was the best thing, as the parental thing to do. But I kind of wanted him to just, not be like just, oh yeah, you're here with him, kind of thing. And so wanted to give him some space, but he just had a wonderful time, and it was just fantastic. And so, in a sense, the highlight was that for me.
That's awesome. That's awesome. All right, Sam, look at this, bringing people from the chat right on. And Sam, who's been to multiple beer camps 3 years ago when we were at Will's church, helped after one of our karaoke hosts was overindulged, and has since helped rein in that experience along with being a quality geek, and been on a number of systematic ecology episodes as well. So, having had multiple camp experiences, Sam, like what it stuck out this year?
Yeah, it was an interesting one this time, right? Because now it's multiples larger than it has been. When we did it was 100 something, then it was 200 something, now it's 600 something. So it's changing at a good clip, and so it's been fun to watch it grow and see what stays the same and see what's different. I prioritize the smaller rooms because partly just I like the more intimate conversation style that we've had, and those weren't being recorded, so I felt like I was going to miss out if I didn't go to those. So even it being at the first one that was 600 people, I still got to sit in the fem space with 12 people and watch weird short films with Sari and have really good conversations. And so the size, but those breakouts, it was really cool to see speakers that I hadn't heard of. I'm reading John Tatamano's book right now because his talk blew my mind.
Yeah,
but then also got to have those intimate conversations, and it's just really fun. I got being on that Dungeons and Dragons panel was so much fun, getting to kind of just dive into you get to talk about implications of some of these hobbies that I don't necessarily get to talk about with the people I play with day to day. And I think one of the advantages of it getting larger, right, is that there's more intersections that you discover and explore between your interests and then the way that just participating in all these different things from the perspective that we have, and just it's a different context of people that you usually don't get in the same room together. So you discover new things about stuff you thought you knew really well, and it was really cool.
For sure.
So is there a particular thing in the D&D panel that pop, because I haven't got to listen to it yet. Josh has the audio, but reading the event reviews, a number of people said they had no idea how much they were going to enjoy the conversation, even though they love playing role-playing games.
Yeah, no, it was really good to unpack because the paper that he was presenting, the essay he contributed to that book, was about the function of Dungeons and Dragons and just tabletop role playing as theological education, as ethical education, and it was a really good conversation. And we got to bring it. We got to tie it up with Ilya Delio's talk, because in her talk right before that, she talked about play as a form of proto-religion, and that helped bring in this conversation of the meaning-making exercise we do, both when we play. Playing is let's invent new rules and let's create a new space and let's test boundaries safely with each other. And then storytelling is the way we've always crafted the narratives and meanings that we that we go through life with, to give life meaning. And that paper and that conversation was about how tabletop role playing is both of those, and that's really powerful, because you get to not just have abstract spaces where we learn about each other, but narratives and meaning come out of it. There's some of the best conversations in it was just then in the stories that happened of times we've played and the things have stuck with us and have helped create meaningful narratives to us. And everyone who's played a lot has a couple of those stories, and it was cool hashing that out with him, and then helping people see oh, that has happened to me. There actually is a load-bearing metaphor in my life that I have gotten from playing these games, because my friends are big nerds about it, and we've told a bunch of cool stories, and some of those have become really meaningful. And it was a really good conversation.
And I'll add too, like Tom shared the story in his paper and in a panel that he wrote this article with his dad, who's a pastor, and coming out of seminary in the 80s, he had a small youth group when he was the associate young pastor at this new church in Alabama. I think that's where it was, right? And and so he only had like 10 kids in youth groups. He's like, I'm gonna start playing D&D with them. And the faith formation and the relationships that they created while playing this game was super meaningful. And of course, the word got out around town, and the satanic panic, and thought he would get some pushback, but and then he gets a phone call from the inventor and creator of D&D. And he thought he was going to get like this cease and desist letter, but it ended up being what's the creator's name?
Gary Gygax.
Gary Gygax.
Yeah. He ended up saying, like, he wasn't in trouble. He was just intrigued. And he was like, oh, tell me more. How are you modifying this for your group? Tell me how this is bringing meaning to your group. What is happening here? I need to know more. This makes me happy. This is joy. And then we made these connections of, like, in terms of larger institutions or religion or the church being gatekeepers rather than permission giving. And so here's the creator of D&D giving permission to this young pastor to play with his youth and say, yeah, take and run with it. Modify it the way you need it for your people in your context, rather than, nope, you got to do it my way. You have to do it this way, or cease and desist. I want, just the different postures it comes to approaches to play and theology and process and adventure was really nice to see, because that's what Theology Beer Camp is all about too. Permission giving to explore where you are and wherever you are in your faith journey. And who you geek out with. And so what an incredible story within that panel to also be permission giving in our own context of life and vocations and ministry to take that same posture.
Mm-hmm. So I want to let Nick talk about our Tolkien panel. One, it was great. Also, I got a message from Josh because he was, editing the audio, and he's like, you, Nick, and Craig should just do a whole podcast where you answer all the questions at the end, because we didn't get to answer them all. Because as someone who's received a lot of questions at events, usually, about something theological or whatever, and you're like, I'm glad I didn't have time, because I don't know how to answer it kindly, or you get these thoughts go through your head. I've never had like 6 questions in a row where I was like, yes. So I just figured we had to do a decent job because the questions were that good. But Nick, kind of talk about the panel and stuff, and then set it up with what happened at the end of camp, and then, just pass the baton over to James, and, like, do the Tolkien thread in whatever way you want. I don't know.
No, it's I'm lucky that Trip is like a big Tolkien nerd, and that this year it was, Lord of the Rings themed. And so lots of things got to tie in. And so I have a privilege in that way. And so the panel, Craig came and talked about Gandalf as kind of like prophetic wizard, and tying wizard to its like origins, or its linguistic origins, meaning wise, and then talking about like the Christian wisdom tradition, and kind of tying it together about like, why is Gandalf wise? It's because he wanders, and in his wandering he meets friends and gathers friends to go on journeys. And then of course the people who are not wise are those who don't go on journeys and isolate themselves, like Sauron, etc. And so that was Craig's talk. And then Trip and I got to ask questions and talk. And did people ask questions before you gave your toast, Trip? Yeah, they did, right?
I don't remember. I think Nick,
we did an offering. We passed the offering
camp
plate.
drinking was during the panel.
We passed the offering plate of
6
beer.
beers at Theology Beer Camp. It's my lowest beers for a
Maybe we
camp,
did.
and 4 of them were in that session.
So I think, I saw people's head shaking. So people asked questions, which were super fun, which, not only are you asking like cool questions, but sometimes you're like, oh, let's talk about the metaphysical realities of death in Middle Earth. but depending on which year Tolkien wrote this certain note on this certain date. It was just fun, and people knew what the hell we were talking about when it came to the different volumes of the history of Middle Earth. And so then Tripp gave this awesome toast about friendship and invoked Sam and Frodo's friendship, which obviously there were tears everywhere. I was crying, Tripp was crying, other people were crying, and so it was super fun. So the Tolkien stuff didn't stop there, though. Before camp started, Tripp was like, "Hey, I want to put together a Tolkien-inspired liturgy. Can you do this?" And I was like, "I can try my best." And so I I Googled different liturgies that were around through like traditional Methodists and Episcopals and all this stuff. And so I put together an outline, and for Rings of Power, Bear McCreary wrote a song that was inspired by a poem from Galadriel, and it was a song sung by Gil-galad called Golden Leaves, and it's basically an elven lamentation. And I was like, we're doing a liturgy, like we have to have some music, like, and this is like perfect. And then I just put out a call in the Theology Beer Camp Facebook, and James and Janelle Ramsey, who is in Denver and I think does a lot of stuff with brew theology.
Yep.
She's amazing. And some others volunteered, but it ultimately ended up being James, Alex, and Janelle. And I came to practice, and by practice I mean like I sat and listened, and James and Alex and Janelle worked their magic and made this gorgeous rendition of Golden Leaves. And at the end of beer camp, after everything was said and done, everyone met in the Theology Geek stage area.
The beer room.
The beer room for those. And everyone grabbed beers. We read the liturgy. There was Will read, some passages. Oh, he read the Song of Eärendil.
I was the most nervous of anything I've ever done, and I've gotten in front and preached to a lot of people. I was scared I was going to mispronounce those names. I was like, please give me something easy to read. I can barely pronounce biblical names, much less Tolkien. But I've never been so nervous. I was like, oh my gosh, this is good. More nervous at my wedding. I was just like, oh my gosh, this is hard. What's going on?
Don't say
no, I was nervous too, because I was like, how many people are going to show up? How many people are actually going to read and sing and participate? But lots of people were there. Almost everyone read in response and sang, which was just very, very encouraging, and it just made the vibes really, really fun. I don't know. And then James, because James was James is awesome. I just want to let y'all know, James, like as we were waiting in the process, he was sending me different versions. He was sending me like videos and different stuff. And then he was like, oh, by the way, I made this cover. And then I did this like beer camp, ode to beer camp thing. So I don't know, James, tell us about the process, and then about your experience with performing the lamentation. And then of course the ode to beer camp.
So, I mean, that was fascinating. It was really cool to be involved in that way.
Didn't know you were such a good pianist.
Be able to get Alex involved was really cool as well. Have him bring along his violin. I mean, he just loved that. And another highlight of beer camp for me, just as an aside, you may have saw her there. This cousin of mine that I hadn't seen for like more than 4 decades came. And you mentioned the Theology and Prog Rock book. So she gave me one of her classic Genesis albums and was like, you need to listen to this, because she saw I was getting into music. And that book and some of my my musical trajectory would probably not have been the same without her influence. And so that was really cool as well. But yeah, I mean, I as you probably know, or otherwise I will happily inflict some examples on you, I have this thing for doing parody songs, usually with a theological twist to them. So Bon Jovi was great, but You Give God a Bad Name, that's really got some potential for this particular crowd, right? And so my latest one is Oh What a Night, December 6 BC. So this is the kind of stuff that I do, right? That's just where my mind goes. And so when you sent it to me, I was like, oh, I want to be involved in this, and I want to do the Elvish authentically because, as Will was saying, with this particular crowd, although we have the sort of people who could probably pronounce Maharshal Hashbaz and not mispronounce Mephibosheth and things like that, but with Tolkien, you got to get the chapter and verse, everything right. Otherwise, you're going to get real objection, right? And so was very concerned about that, but also then started thinking, oh, we could do something that would thank the people, stuff like that. So I'll give a shout out to anyone who's listening to this. If you recorded any of that, the people that got the shout outs, right? There was this Trinitarian leadership structure this year, right? You had Sari and Mark along with Kristen, and they were busy making sure that stuff was continuing to function right up until the very end, and so they actually weren't there. And so if you recorded it and are thinking, oh, well, I'm not sure I was supposed to be recording it, we're glad you recorded it, but share that so that we can pass it along to them because they didn't get to hear it.
Once again, bootlegs preserve culture.
Yes.
What was that?
I said, once again, bootlegs are preserving culture where the corporate cannot.
Yeah.
So, I'll just say, from my perspective, like and Nick said, I was like, I had this idea that we should just do a liturgy in the legendarium of Tolkien. And then I don't think we talked about it, Nick, for a couple months. And then I just get this email with a PDF and I'm looking at it and I'm like, oh. So then I call him and I'm like, I know you Nazarenes don't do liturgy. But like, I think we should think about the different readings. So there's like the Silmarillion functions as the Hebrew Bible. You got to pick a poetry or something in there for the Psalm. And then we had a rather significant conversation while I was walking the dog as to the status of Lord of the Rings or the Hobbit for Gospels and epistles, or do we want the epistle to be a Tolkien letter? And we're having this conversation, and I'm like, look, it's way too close to camp. I have spent this is an aside. James is right. Well, one, Kristen and I met every other week for the first 6 months and every week for the second 6 months. I archived 1,100 emails after I got back that were still open in my thing. They were beer camp related. And then the last 6 months, so Sari and Mark, they met every other week for 3 months and then every week for 3 months. And then the last 3 months, we all met every week. Like, the amount of time it occupies from going to like 250. Like the first year in 2017, we had like 150. And then it was always kind of around that. And then there was COVID. And then like 250 when we were in Chapel Hill and 400 last year and then 600 this year. It now is like I'm always doing Theology Beer Camp. So it's real depressing when someone doesn't like it. Because I just think to myself, I probably spent less time writing books than I did putting this thing together. And you know what books don't have? A bill over $100,000. So, and sadly, I'm not sure I'm going to make any money again this year, despite what Twitter told me about how much money I was raking in off my progressive agenda, ruining Jesus. Those cops are expensive. Anyway,
okay, but I did hear the seeds that it sounds like this group needs to write like a Tolkien like lectionary for people to go through.
Oh God, that I think we should suggest the idea, Sam. Let Nick do it, and then just light edits at the end. Because
that's my favorite
he
kind of
writes
idea.
it, James and Alex produce it, Janelle sings it, and then if you're like me, you walk in there after cleaning up and putting out fires, and all of a sudden they're like, "Do your toast," and you're like, "All right." And people are like, "Oh, that was so great, Trip," and I'm like, "You should tell Nick." But yeah,
So-
so we had this. I was on a walk. I talked to him. The next thing I know, he's like updated the whole freaking thing, and James knows this. I had to cut like 5 or 6 things 2 weeks before, which involved very awkward phone conversations with individuals that were really disappointed, along with cutting my actual keynote, which I had prepared. I had the slides for it. Anyway, and then this happens, and I'm like, he's like, yeah, James wrote a song for it. Janelle's singing it, and I'm like, oh, junk. There's no way we cannot do this. And so it just had to happen, and it was like oddly the most perfect ending. Some people, they were just like still crying after the Eucharist, and others were like, look, you can you can let me eat Jesus, but you know what I really want to do? Toast Frodo.
Well, it was like the equivalent of Friends Are Friends Forever. At Youth Camp. It was the equivalent. People had arms and arms next to each other, swaying back and forth, raising their toast. We're doing Friends Are Friends Forever at the end of camp, going, I'm going to see you soon. Keep in touch. Write me letters. And it was just a beautiful moment. A beautiful, beautiful moment.
Oh, God. That's so funny. But yeah, rarely do I think ideas I have get played out that well, and so Nick and James, Alex and Janelle, that was quite wonderful.
Beautiful.
All right, so I'm gonna ask another question, unless someone thought of something they want to say. Okay, so I want to know what surprised you at camp. All of y'all have been multiple times, but like, what surprised you? Think of it as like encouragement for this still existing next year, and a lure to people that maybe didn't come, or if you came and like Sam said, there were so many different things going on, and like each room that had anything happen, that's probably 30 emails, because there's the like, and then I find I'm only in the sessions I'm in, and then I find out all these cool stuff happen, and then I feel FOMO for something I spent a year planning, and I'm like, oh, I can't have multiple bodies. But see, that's probably a topic for the Geek stage. But like, what was something that surprised you this year, as you're talking to someone that's already had his first meeting and talked to 4 potential people that are interested in hosting and trying to explain what they're signing up for.
Cool.
Well, the themes trip, we went with the trilogy route: God Pods Strike Back, the Return of the God Pod. Are we going prequels? Are we going the God Pod Menace? Phantom Menace? Like what are we doing? Some prequels? We're doing Rings of Power prequel stuff. I want to know where are we going to run with.
I feel like I want to work backwards from the cosplay outfit I will write off on taxes.
Yeah.
The theme that was kicking in my head was we should do Batman so we can call it God Pods Forever.
God Pods Forever.
And then we can kind of segue into a new naming thing from there. But God Pods Forever is just ringing in my head.
I love it. That's so good.
And we could then we can have a bat signal.
Yes.
Right now, Texas.
Ryan will dress up as Catwoman.
Hell no.
There's
in this chat more qualified than me. Nick.
Ryan, you're on stage there. What was surprising for you this time? You drove all the way to Chapel Hill, and then you're the car that we use most of the time.
So Will, that is one of the things. I'm surprised I keep driving to these things.
So you can drive me places. That's your
you guys are worse than my kids. My car is more destroyed after a beer camp than it is my kids, for an entire busy week, which I guess is, I don't know.
Will doesn't have Cheerios.
Nobody keeps passing me snacks in the backseat.
I kept saying to Nick and Josh Patterson the entire week, I was like, Will is the world's best youth pastor of the world's worst youth group.
Me and my 30-somethings. Come around, gather around my 30-somethings.
30-year-old emotionally damaged, drunk former youth pastors. And they're just like, Will, tell us it's going to be okay, man. Please.
I'm going on an adventure.
But honestly, the thing that surprised me is so every year I've like the last 2 years that I've gone back to beer camp, I always tell myself going into it, I was like, oh, I'm so excited to meet this person. And, you know, again, I'm so excited to see this person, that person. And the thing that I think I came away with this time was I'm surprised by how deep these friendships are. And we really only see each other once a year. Like I love so many of my friends through beer camp more than like people that are friends that live in town here, friends that I have in town. Not that I don't love them as well, but the connection is different. Like I talk to Will about anything and everything. Nick and I have had long conversations where he's helped me out gratefully. Like, you know, Josh Patterson is one of my closest friends. Like, it's just like I don't get to see these people so often. So I always kind of go to beer camp surprised at how much friendship, like activity we're able to pack into 3-4 days. And then I leave and I'm like, you know what? I stinking love those guys and I would do anything for them. So I think I'm not surprised, but I also am surprised at how deeply I love my friends that I've met through beer camp. And, you know, I even go back to a few years ago when I was, you know, looking around for a Jason Aaron interview to listen to. And I listened to Trip and Will interview my favorite comic book writer for a few hours, reached out to Will, and meeting Will Rose changed my life. So that continually surprises me. And that's like been 3.5 years. I'm surprised by how much beer camp and, meeting Will and what I affectionately call the Trip Fuller verse has changed my life. Yeah. So, that's it for me.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Who's next? I don't mean that in like the Goldberg way. No one's getting speared.
Nick, your ass is next.
I'll build on that since you talk about the friendships, but I think the Trip Fuller verse of the TripCon, I like to call it TripCon, like
TripCon.
Is TripCon because it's all the things that like you curate throughout the year with conversations of some of your favorite theologians, philosophers, and authors, and those, and you bring them together in person, so you get to see the people that you listen to or engage with on like an online community. That in-person connection is just as important. And so it's hard to do that, in churches we do it once a week, and then other places, you try to make reunions happen more than once a year. But this coming together once a year with people that you connect with online with or at a large distance from, I think is important. And meet some of your spiritual heroes is or them, knowing that they're just people like you are too. I mean, that kind of stuff is always special. But I guess what surprised me this year, it's fun as a person who hosted one at a church and how we did it. It was great to be just part of one and let someone else do that hard work. But to see how how you guys, in terms of those in charge, I know it's a lot of work goes into it, but just to see in another facility, another town, another community, the impact it has to the neighborhood and the people that gather in that church community. And we were the final day, we were kind of picking up and cleaning our stuff out of the Geek stage room, and there was an older gentleman who had a vest and a name tag on, member of that church. And I was like, hey, thanks for doing this. And he was like, oh, I happen to be the church council president or whatever. I'm like, oh, okay, well, great. Well, really, thank you. And we had a conversation, and I was like, shared my story. And it's like, hey, if you find a beer can or a pint glass 3 months from now, just clean it up. Don't send an email to anybody. Just throw it away, because that might happen. You might find a pint glass in the corner with mold in it. Just throw it away. It's fine. You don't have to.
In the nursery.
Yeah, in the nursery.
In the nursery,
you may find it, but just don't tell anybody. Throw it away.
And don't give any of the youth in trouble. It's not them.
Yeah, the building relationships and the topics are, again, they are important, and the questions that are being engaged for culture, society, religion, our environment, the planet that we share are all important. But it's the before and the after conversations that are just as important, and and life building in my book.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think kind of similar to that as far as what surprised me, because like I expect to have make cool connections and have good conversations, but I think the nature of the people I met and the types of conversations that were there was not what I was expecting. Because as it grew, it seemed like a lot of the new audience was an older crowd than the last one, and also
Yeah.
a lot more. There was a lot more clergy, like a lot more church staff, like than it seems like, at least that I was meeting. And so the conversations I had there, and even after the Dungeons and Dragons panel, I kept conversations going with Dr. Webster the rest of the time. And like I recently, in the last couple of years, have kind of jumped back into church with both feet, and I'm in my church leadership team, and I'm a voting delegate at the Virginia Methodist Annual Conference, and I found out Dr. Webster is a Methodist as well, and we ended up having really good, just kind of like, he had good advice as I'm getting, like, I did my first annual conference, and he told me stories about his first conferences, and that was a really cool connection. And just seeing clergy sing, like the workshops that were for people who work in churches, just kind of seeing that side of things grow in the conversation was cool. And it was encouraging, because I know, like, it's my first time coming, when it was in the smaller ones, it still kind of feels like, it's, at least coming from my background, like it felt like a small rebel meeting. But just seeing that, a wider and wider group, and like, not just the new people rattling, rocking the boat, but like that, just to see the scope of people and institutions and groups that want to learn and do things in this, in this way we do them. It was really encouraging. And like, I wasn't expecting I expect to be encouraged. I was not expecting that type of encouragement. I felt better about the way I'm involved in church, and the conversation I have, the things I'm part of. And that was really cool. And the second biggest surprise was that I was hosting that panel. But we made it work.
I'll piggyback of what Sam said about just connecting with people from like denominations or like clergy and church stuff, just because, being the weird ex-Nazarene in the digital room, and like, as Trip was early on, as part of like that deconstruction phase and finding out about process. And then I was like, oh, Tom Ward is here? What the heck? And I was trying to be a Nazarene pastor. And so I was like, what? How does Trip know Tom? It was weird. And then when I was this year, I met a ton of either like Nazarenes that are progressive closeted Nazarenes or ex-Nazarenes, and ended up getting margaritas and mezcal with Janelle, who I found out was deeply involved in the Church of the Nazarene, and I had no clue. And so I think just like this group here, like we were all, besides James, he was at last year, and then all four of us were the year before. And I think all of us kind of like didn't know each other. Like I remember Sam on karaoke, and then of course Will and Ryan in the Geek stage at the church. And then now we've created like this little internal, like, I don't know what the right word is, but like the galaxy cabal, or whatever, of friends. Did you say cabal?
Yes.
Yeah, secret society, Illuminati of homebrewed or of Theology Beer Campers. But how, like, in the same way about how that universe keeps expanding, and how like I don't know, just my if I'm a planet in this galaxy, like my ecology keeps changing from all the interactions I'm getting from everyone, and the quality and the types of relationships I'm building, new relationships, but then even deepening the ones that are here. And yeah, even as Ryan said, these are some of the best people I know on the internet that I get to see once a year in person, than in my daily life. So
awesome. You know what, Nick? I got something for you just because I appreciate you.
Give me the meat and give it to me raw.
Aw. Every time. It'll be raw every time.
Give me the meat and give it to me raw.
All right, James.
How can James follow?
By the way, that is a Rings of Power soundboard clip during the 4th, talking to his buddy elf.
So I think the thing that surprised me, the thing that surprised me last year, which was my first time attending, was that this thing called Theology Beer Camp that sounds like it should be completely frivolous, and there's a lot of frivolity and a lot of nerdiness, but it was the most profound spiritual experience and spiritual gathering that I'd had in a long time. And one of the things that surprised me this year was that, no, that's not a fluke, a one-off of last year. That is characteristic. And so, in terms of like the little things that surprised you, I was surprised that like there were tables and tables of seminaries that are there trying to connect with the people who go to Theology Beer Camp. That wasn't there last year, and that was a new thing, I was like, oh wow, this is new direction and interesting. But just the way this provides a model for church, because there's a lot of despair, and you talk to some of the people who do things like present on panels at Theology Beer Camp and talk about the history and where we are going and does the church have a future and things like that. And this is a model for community, and the fact that for those who are alienated from their local congregations and things like that, it provides the kind of community between the in-person gatherings and the online that it can sustain them in their faith and in their hope and in so much, even with meeting so rarely. It's wonderful and it's beautiful. And, I don't want to change the name to anything else. And yet, the frivolous name doesn't do justice to what this thing is. And that's the thing that I think probably, even when I'm going to my 10th or 20th Theology Beer Camp, just will continue to maybe it'll stop surprising me, but it'll continue to wow me.
Yeah,
and I liked, Trip, how you had the regional one lunch. You had have lunch with your region and make it up people who are nearby you. And I had a couple guys here from Chapel Hill that I already knew who were up there. We're having lunch on Wednesday together. Just to talk about beer camp and what we experienced and hang out. And there was the solidarity groups too. How do you identify whether you're a doubter or whether questioner, or I don't know what the other ones were, but just to be able to say like, hey, to know you're not alone, like come hang out and see that you're not alone in this. Cause sometimes you listen to these conversations and your earbuds and you feel like you are alone. It's great that they're having these conversations out there in the distance, this transcendent conversation happening on the internet. But then when you meet someone face to face and you see that you're not alone and community together is pretty important that provides. So good on that. That was good. Great idea.
Oh, that's good to hear. It's so 2 years ago, like obviously coming out of lockdown, the amount of energy that went into it, I literally just emailed 30 friends who had, like, I asked homebrewed members, like, who would you want to hang out with? And then the ones that got more than 10 votes, I emailed them and was like, here's my birthday. I haven't been in lockdown. I haven't got to have a birthday for 3 years. I turned 40. Can y'all come to camp? Because normally I would do multiple in the summer, but with 3 kids, that doesn't really work if you want the rest of your family to like you. And so we did it, and it had a very different feel because as opposed to doing like 3 over the summer that are regional, you get a different critical mass, which then allows you to have more niche breakout sessions and stuff, right? Like, oh, Will's like, can we just do some systematic ecology in the room? And I was like, can we do some Tolkien? And then I'm like, Nick and I are going to show up in there. And like, I was like, good, there's a 64-ounce beer for me to talk about Frodo. All right, great. This is great, because at a normal beer camp before that, because I would do multiple in the summer, it's not like if you have 150 people this week and then next week there's no like critical mass for a Tolkien conversation, or like like how many people have to go to a Theology Beer Camp that you're going to have a group show up who are like clergy for a pregame event at the same time the open relational theology is, the same time they're playing D&D, like, and all that kind of stuff, right? And so there are all these possibilities that come up with multiple people, even though there's tons of extra work. But for me, the whole time, Theology Beer Camp has always been a like, as someone who loved being in the classroom and in the local congregation and is a hardcore extrovert, believe it or not,
What?
it is exhausting doing all this stuff on the internet without hanging out with anyone. Like, oh, look at this, you had 5 million downloads this year, and I'm like, yeah, but I've only hung out with 7 of them. And so, like, this is the solution to that. But when we were in lockdown, and I was like, oh, I'm going to do it again, I'm talking to Alicia. She said, look, you've been running into a brick wall for years trying to finally get a real job at a university like James, you know. And we're not moving our family again. There's 3 of us. So like Elgin wants to go to high school at the same place or whatever. She's like, what if you use all the hours you would normally put into people in the classroom or at your congregation into relating to a lot, like people like y'all, like that we have connections online. You do a podcast, you're part of this community or whatever. And relationships with scholars or whatever, like put your relational energy there and then make camp like the place you do the thing that animates you most, even though most people just think you're a nerd that likes to hang out online. And so hearing this, it's very rewarding for me. I wouldn't have thought this could have existed unless a partner that knows me better than I know myself told me, like, do it. But like, just, you know, this might creep some people out, but if you're a clergy, it might not. Like, I'm like the guy, you know, that like gets the names of everyone coming, and this is very processed. So this is a process version. This is not an evangelical version. You actually like join anticipatory prehensions for the building of community, and it's called prayer. But I'm just saying it differently because saying that you prayed for everyone coming when they bought tickets creeps some people out. But you're like doing it, and then like you're connected to all these people with all these meetings, and there are all these different things. You're like talking to Nick, and there's like, oh, this is going on. There's like James got brought in, and then like all your friends are doing all this stuff. It's like when it all goes down, like for me and Kristen and Sari and Mark put all this time orchestrating, but then there are all these different pockets of people that took leadership at different stuff. And when it comes together, and then like, look, there are 600 people there. 80% of them picked 5 out of 5 for rating an event. And as someone that has ran lots of events and had grants, that is very high.
That
And
is a
all
net
but
promoter score to envy.
yeah, in all but 2 there are 600 people, all but 2 that didn't pick 5 pick 4. And so I just want you to know that is completely impossible without the fact that all these people that come, they have relationships with these different people coming all online and stuff, and then they show up and they realize that for these few days, the only assumption they can make about everyone else is that they give a shit about them, regardless of what questions they have or pain they may have, or like whatever they're into. There's a different room for it. Like what happens at Theology Beer Camp is you happen to be in any of those niches, and when we say the word God, it's whatever part of the definition of God overlaps with like love. There's a lot of space in that Venn diagram. But when we do God, it's like God and love, wherever the overlap part is, maybe with some more Jesus in it than other people if you have a bigger Christology like me. But nonetheless, that's what we're doing. And so it's extremely rewarding. It's weird, you know, as someone that used to preach 30 times a year and then do regular weekly things, like you put a lot of effort into all this. So like just hearing all that is really rewarding. Sorry for those of you that creeped out, that you thought Trip printed out the attendees and prayed for them. But it was in a process. It's a non-coercive form of it.
It just goes to show all those great reviews. Prayer works. Prayer works, Trip.
Dang.
Yeah, but okay.
Did you pray for all the chairs beforehand? Because I would do that at youth group.
No. We just sprinkled gold dust over the place. Okay, so here one other question, and if you had pick any one word, you can think about this, but one word to be like, what happened at Theology Beer Camp? You only had to pick one word. One word. What would it be? And why I say that, I just want to tell everyone, hey, if you've come before, want to have you come back, you can go to theologybeer.camp. I had no idea .camp was like an ending for a URL till I bought it. Nonetheless, you can go there, you sign up, and then because one of the things that's important, hearing how this works, these are just some of the people from the Geek stage. We'll talk to some of the other people probably throughout this, online and stuff. But it works so much better for me, like when there's like critical mass of year to year, and of people that's come before, because they get the vibe, and then other people show up and like, oh, what a cool vibe, I dig this. And so if you sign up at theologybeer.camp, you'll get the email of where it's going to be in the dates before other people do, and then you'll get like the ability to buy tickets cheaper than other people and get it early and all that kind of stuff. We had multiple requests by clergy. They're like, can you sell tickets before the end of the year so I can use my continuing ed fund? So I'm just saying, if you've come before or are very interested, go ahead and sign up, because we're working hard. Find the location, get dates. There's been tons of cool ideas from the survey and stuff that we're going to try to integrate. If you did come and you fill out the survey, or you haven't done, you can go do it. But also, if you want to volunteer, like, no one on this call had any responsibility at Theology Beer Camp, and now I'm like, I just know they're going to be a part of stuff. I actually told Sam that she has to be a part of the Geek stage next year because of the reviews from the D&D panel. So the Geek
Hell
stage
yeah.
people are just going to have to suck it up. And
Can't
so,
get rid of me.
yeah. So anyway, I say that because it's very collaborative. And like I mentioned earlier, it is not a means of economic return. It's one that, like I told the story about Alicia pointing this out. Like, to me, it's one of the places that the things I enjoy most about someone that takes their vocation as a theologian of the church seriously. This is one of those places that matters to me. So if you're a part of it, connect. And then you could tell people on the survey if you want to be a volunteer or if you have ideas and stuff. It's very collaborative. You can have lots of input, and then you never know what parts will end up fitting in, because there's only, look,
We do it live.
yeah. I was about to say something, and I would just look. I'm just saying, there's a lot of effort put in to allow ownership, and the community part is the most important to me. So there you go. So, okay, Jeremy, I didn't even know that it was an option for people in chat to play the one word, but Jeremy said transcendent. So but he also was optimistic. He enjoyed the Tolkien session, which I understand. I enjoy the Tolkien session every year, and I'm optimistic I will next year.
Well,
I got my
let me
election
go. I
shirt.
got
All right.
I have to bounce in a second, and if I
Oh,
leave,
I
it's
got
not
to
'cause
too,
of-
because tomorrow we're all going to be up late.
Oh yeah, we are for like days. But I'll and then I just want to know if Trip has any extra Lord of the Rings cigars left over that I can drive down the road. and
Oh,
have one.
Will, my humidor is open for you.
That's right.
That's so gross.
Yeah, I would.
Give it to me raw.
Gonna end on that. Give it to me raw. Give it to me raw. The word I'll use is relational. Yeah, it's transcendent, but I'll say it's relational and it's open. You don't know what's going to happen. Where these relationships are going to take you, or how it's going to change your life or guide your life. But relational. That's the word I'm going to use. And on that, peace, y'all. I'm off to drive to Trip's humidor.
Bye, Will.
Is wide open humidor.
All right, Ryan.
honestly, I think John in the chat has it really nailed. When I think of beer camp, the one word that comes to mind is friendship. Not just because of the friendships I've already established, but the friendships I keep getting because of beer camp. Like, just one example was, there are not a lot of Theology Beer Camp like-minded people in rural Nebraska. Shocking. So when I met Bo, one of our amazing camp counselors, and Bo and I start talking after beer camp had already closed, he was like, "Hey, dude, I live in Omaha," and I was like, "The hell you do? Why are we not best friends, man?" So Bo and I now are friends on Instagram. We talk, we can talk about Nebraska stuff that the rest of you don't even care about. But it's like, I didn't know Bo 3 months ago, but now, like, I would consider him an acquaintance budding into a friendship, and we actually have common ground, not just through beer camp, but through living in the same area, which is something I didn't really have before this year at beer camp, because all my friends were hundreds of miles away. So friendships that I keep getting. So John, thank you for the good suggestion in the chat, man.
Also, Bo is an ex-Nazarene. Just want to note that.
Oh, I knew there was something fishy about him.
I think just taking it is just family. I think that, like, many of us who go to beer camp, I think many of us have experienced rejection from friends, families, and religious communities, and, like, it's not because we don't want these things. Like, we're actively trying to be like, hey, can we be a part of this friendship and family and community? And people are like, no, thank you. And so I think that many of us are like, I've talked to, like, the experience of, like, what the hell? I keep putting myself out there, and it's not like, the church example. I'm like, I've been tithing. I, like, get involved. I show up every Sunday, and people are like, thanks, but no thanks. And so when you go to beer camp, and you have family that you interact with on a regular basis, that you see in person, that you contribute finances to, you collaborate with, you worship with, and you learn with, it's just family. It's just family.
All right. Sam?
The word that comes to my mind is redemptive, just in that there's a lot of ways I used to engage with faith, the Bible, the church, just, it has this kind of youth camp like structure, and there's an irreverent veneer on top of the whole thing that makes it safe to approach. And then when I get there, I discovered that the irreverence is not it's not out of disrespect, it's out of, like, vulnerability. And I've always loved the way that beer camp lets me engage in all of these different practices and structures, and I can have my tongue as firmly in my cheek as I need to at the moment to be safe. And then at some point, like, the bit is gone, and I'm participating again. There's modes of Christian family and community that that just coming out of the background I was in, I wasn't sure I'd ever actually participate in safely again. And it's been really cool to rediscover faith in a way that feels honest and safe and has room for all kinds of people and experiences in it.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. All right, James.
I'll be a New Testament nerd, because we've had all these theologians throwing in all this, technical term from their, in their jargon. But I was going to throw in ecclesia, just because church, that's got a lot of, bad connotations for people who are used to, first of all, sitting face forward and facing some authoritarian who is, sometimes spouting invectives, maybe even aimed at them. But Derek actually beat me to it in the chat. My congregation is a great way of putting it, right? It's people getting together. I remember discovering, after reading the New Testament, and even when you read in Greek, you spend most of your time reading in English, and so just thinking about the word that's used where it says he was teaching, and in fact the word means dialogue. It means he was discussing, right? I mean, it wasn't that they were listening to a long sermon and he was preaching on, and he was the one talking. They were having conversation and they were eating together, and they were doing exactly what we were doing at Theology Beer Camp. Now, some of the time we are, all facing in the same direction, but when you're facing in the same direction, looking at and listening to, Diana Butler Bass or Jonathan Hammond or somebody like that, it's different than what some of us experience in certain other contexts that we might be in. And so, again, I keep coming back to this thing that this is a hopeful model for church, right? That those of us that gather in this, whichever one place it is, can take back with us and try to inject into our local communities if we have them, or try to create things locally that have them, right? Because this is not just something we do once a year in this other place. It's something that, if we can't find our people, if in certain places in Nebraska it's challenging or things like that, then you find them online, but you also build community, right? Because I'm increasingly convinced that there are more people who think in a Theology Beer Camp sort of mind. To quote a song, beer camp state, or in a beer camp state of mind, but who have been sort of cowed into keeping quiet about it, right? And if we're courageous enough to be voices for this kind of open and inclusive faith, it may not be huge numbers, and some people may cheer us on, but quietly and under their breath because they're afraid of losing connection and things like that. But it makes a difference, and that excites me, right? And so my congregation, I like that.
You're here.
Awesome. Well, this has been a blast. I'm very excited about next year. I'll just say there have been two little nuggets that even those words made me think of. One was getting an email from a clergy who connected with the Solidarity Circle groups that were there, which is Jorg and Aaron both participated in panels and talking and stuff, but they had these 2 breakout sessions that were giving people a taste of what happens when you bring the tools of community organizing into faith communities to work for solidarity in the group. And just getting an email from clergy that was like, I finally have people that can help me do the things I've been wanting to do where I felt isolated, right? So imagining a congregation where there's a leadership that wants to do something but doesn't know the tools, with very little time, and so many congregations that clergy have. That was exciting. And at the very end of camp, in the Eucharist, someone was a bit emotional, and then I got tagged in to hold the bread, and the second person hugged me, which then led to 100 people hugging me every time I was, serving it. And as someone that regularly has spent time learning to ask before invading people's bubble, as Baptist preacher's kid, it was kind of expected just to hug everyone if you've seen them before. That was great. But there's a couple of grandparents who came with their 2 college-age queer grandkids, who had the Eucharist together and said thank you. One of their granddaughters, they said that they'd never felt that all of them was welcome at the table, or that they were being empowered to bring something new in the world. Right. And so just like seeing the grandparents, being able to have them in that space, and these 20 somethings having a blast and going like, oh, like this is my table too. Those kind of things of imagine it, like just is extremely rewarding. And I think all the different stories and stuff you shared, make it worth all the time that gets put into it throughout the year. And I'm very excited about next year, and definitely looking forward to the Geek stage. If the event comes up with a way for me to write off getting a bat signal, that
Yes.
God gods forever.
I'm just saying. Like,
God pause.
I know.
James, yes.
Oh my. And the question is like, how many different Batmans could we have someone cosplaying in every version
Yeah.
of the Batman suit?
Oh yeah.
And which one would I want to do? I mean, it's really hard to decide.
Each stage could be like a different Batman theme,
Oh
right?
my god, dude. Yes.
You got like the Bat Cave, you got Arkham Prison stage. You got
Well, Kristen Siri, I think your job is done here.
See, I was just like, do enough people know Battlestar Galactica to do?
Oh, that would be cool.
And I was like, what's the version of podcast? And so say we all. Anyway.
I would love an excuse to teach people the Battlestar Galactica board game because it is my favorite board game ever.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Is it like, is the map all the planets, or are you playing?
No, the map is on the ship, and you are trying to get the ship to Earth or to whatever the destination you drew is, and you're trying to get the ship to the end without the ship exploding. So you're all working together, but you draw cards at the beginning, and two of you are Cylons that actually secretly want everybody to lose.
Oh,
hell yeah.
Okay, that sounds fun.
It's real good.
Yeah. All right. This has been fun. We'll see you all later. And, there's a lot of podcasts for you to go check out. Ryan just had Jason Aaron back on. So you definitely want to see that. Nick
talked about Superman.
And James both have brand new books. So pod we all.
Oh hell yeah.
Derek. Awesome.
Oh my. And yeah. I just don't even know what character I'd pick. If we were doing Battlestar. Like, I love Battlestar Galactica. When they added it back on Amazon, that's really made it difficult to sleep for a couple weeks.
I think we at least have a Geek Stage panel topic.
If you go with Battlestar Galactica as the theme, there's a serious chance that I will fulfill a dream since childhood and get from the original series the Colonial Viper pilot, those jackets and the whole thing. That was the coolest uniform ever.
It'll be a shame to make the closing liturgy weird and confusing and disappointing, though. But...
Oh, the closing liturgy has to be Adama's speech at the end of the mini-series, right? Like where he gives the promise of earth and does the so say we all, and they go back and forth. So say we all, so say we all. Like, come on. Adama, I love him. He makes me happy.
What God Pod's going to be next time? You know they don't like being called that.